stuff. As we welcome in our 1320 Kings insider and creator of the Kings Beat, James Ham. Hey, James, kind of a weird day here. Started the show talking about, wow, I think Lithuania's coach just revealed to us that Domantas Sabonis had surgery on his right thumb. Wasn't like a shocker. We even backtracked to Sean Cunningham's famous interview with Domantas Sabonis at the zoo that was posted on June 1st, in which he hadn't had surgery yet, but they had a scan. They were monitoring it. They were following everything. And then you reported literally minutes later, yeah, that didn't happen. Your league sources tell you that Domantas Sabonis, in fact, has not had thumb surgery. So, James, what the hell?
Okay, so anytime there is an injury like this, we learned this with Neemias Keeta just like 2 days ago, right? Well, just yesterday. Like the Kings have to press release if a guy goes in for surgery. They have to actually give a medical update, as long as it's a substantial injury. And Domantas Sabonis' thumb has been a substantial injury the entire time. I mean, it's an avulsion fracture. We've all done all the homework on what that means. You know, the bone getting pulled off along with the tendon in the thumb. But I continued to hear nothing that he was not going in for surgery, at least not yet. And the Kings had yet to send anything out. So I was as surprised as anybody this morning. But before I started retweeting and running everything down and you need to go and confirm. And so I have got confirmation that no, he has not had surgery, and he continues to keep plugging away, trying to do his rehab. He's doing ice. He's doing all the treatment that they've had him doing since December. And the hope is that he won't have to have surgery. And this can change. It can change at any time. But, I know that Doug Christie has been down in Southern California working out with Domantas like nonstop. So we would have heard something, at least some rumblings, I would think. But as of right now, like my sources say, no, he has not had surgery. And the fact is he's not going to play for the Lithuanian national team this summer because he's prepping for the season and he needs to make sure that his hand is perfect. And that's what he's doing. He's trying to focus on that.
We hypothesized that Domas just lied to his coach. Like he told his agent, like, we don't really want to do FIBA this year. All right, what do you want me to tell him? Bro, I don't know. Tell him I'm having surgery. I don't care. And then, Coach M tells everyone, oh, yeah, his health, and yeah, he had surgery on his thumb. So, that rest and rehab didn't go the way the Kings hoped. So we don't get Domas this year. That's what I believe happened, and I'm sticking to it.
Coach, man, my thumb, Coach. You know how it is. I can't even pick nothing up right now.
Domas is just enjoying the offseason too much. Like, oh, Coach, I can't, man. Just surgery, Coach. It's the avulsion thing.
Yeah, I feel for him because, it's a big deal to play for your country, and he loves to play for his country. But this also isn't the Olympics. It's not, the biggest of the biggest tournaments that he's missing out on.
Yeah.
And so for him, I think it just makes a lot of sense. He's got, a pregnant wife at home. He's got a little one at home, and it's something where, you don't have to play every single time, especially at 27. You have some high aspirations for what this season could be for you in Sacramento. And the last thing you want to do is add another, 20 practices and 10 games leading up to the regular season. And so I don't blame him for not going overseas. And again, it's possible too that this was all lost in translation, and that, somebody like basically misinterpreted what was said, whether it was in Lithuanian or whether it was in English. I doubt it was in English. And so there's possible that there is some sort of, mix up here when it comes to just language barrier stuff.
James, you said something that was
didn't stop Bleacher Report from running with
man,
it.
I've seen a couple. Sabonis underwent surgery. No, sir, he actually didn't. But you said something that kind of caught my ear that I didn't know. I always thought these teams and the player, like we were hypothesizing earlier, I was like, well, why don't the Kings ever just say these things? Like, why does it always come out? And we were like, well, maybe Domas doesn't want it out, and they have to get his permission before doing something. But you said if he has surgery, they're obligated to say, hey, this player had surgery, regardless if they want it to come out or not. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Yeah, they are obligated. And but that doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of back and forth that goes on behind the scenes. Like we had the Tyrese Halliburton situation like a year and a half ago where it dragged on for like 3 or 4 days where it's like, what in the world is going on? You know, we had the Rashawn Holmes situation where he had a sore shoulder. And like very specifically, I asked, is it a torn labrum? Is it a AC joint sprain? Is it a grade 1, 2, or 3 separation? Is it a dislocated shoulder? Like, what is it that he did? And got nothing for like 6 weeks. And then finally they shut him down because he had a torn labrum, which is a question that I had specifically asked. But again, no surgery. So we have minor incidents like last year, Malik Monk rolled his ankle, right? And everyone was worried that he was going to be out for a bunch of time. And then he ended up playing the next game. That's something where they don't have to press release something because it's not something that reaches the level of games missed and, you know, the severity of what's required. But like if somebody gets a concussion, we find out. If somebody, you know, blows out a knee or when De'Aaron Fox had the grade 3 ankle sprain, those are all things that they have to give forth to us. But at the same time, there's a vetting process about what is actually said to the media and how those things are sent out. So most medical updates, they go through like 5 or 6, maybe 7 hands. Like there's a media relations staff would write something up. Then it goes to the player agent and the front office. And then there's a powwow about what it says. And then they make adjustments. So, I mean, have you ever seen a press release that said the surgery went completely wrong? Like every single press release, it's like boilerplate after successful surgery. I'm like, how do we know if it's successful? You just did it. You know, we don't know that it's successful. Yeah, you cut him open, you fix something, and you sewed him back up. Again, what is successful and how do we deem it to be successful? These are all things that you have to kind of look at. And
yeah, they just don't tell you. You find out 6 weeks later.
Man.
Yeah, so-and-so had a second surgery to repair something. No, this one was successful too. Just like the first one. We just thought, you know, we had so much fun a month ago. Let's go do it again.
Yeah, I even think there was like a big gray area years ago where the Kings sent Chris Webber in for an ACL tear, and it ended up being a complete disaster in the knee, and they did microfracture surgery. And microfracture surgery was just in its beginning stages. There'd only been a couple of players who had it, where they drill like a whole bunch of holes in the bone, and then they hope that it like builds like a calcification back over it, and that's where they attach stuff. And like it's a really interesting like what happened in that situation. But the Kings really didn't tell anyone it was microfracture until much later. It was an ACL tear. Now it's way before my day. But you know, those are things where like they have these discussions behind the scenes about what exactly it is that we're going to put out there. Where, you know, again, like we saw the report with Neemias yesterday, it's very specific, you know, like I don't have the language pulled up in front of me, but or maybe maybe I do. Yeah, he had a stress reaction and a metatarsal capsule sprain in his right foot.
When that happens.
Yeah. Well, and you know, the thing though that I didn't notice, and I don't know if they showed it on the broadcast or not, but it didn't look like Nimi was in a boot. And that's a good sign. You know, if they're not immobilizing, that's a really good sign where, you know, there are players in the past here in Sacramento that may or may not have like just traveled with a boot just in case in their suitcase. Not going to name names, but you know, like to not be in a boot is a big deal. If he's able to walk on it, he's able to move around. Now, again, we have the whole situation with Neemias Keeta where we have no idea, like on the broadcast, very specifically, the play-by-play announcer on Monday night said that Neemias Keeta had signed a 2-way contract with the Kings.
Wow.
That has not been press released. And at this point, I can only believe that that was inaccurate at that moment. And we still don't know. But like, again, I've got nothing from inside confirming that he's been signed to a two-way contract. But sometimes these things get out there the wrong way and are just thrown out there by someone who maybe didn't really know the whole specifics of what was happening.
Yeah, I don't know if you caught PJ last night, but they were talking about Neemias on the bench, and I don't think he had a boot on either because he had he had a nice sweatsuit on. I remember thinking,
yeah,
sweatsuit.
In
But
Vegas.
Keeta was on the sideline, and PJ even made a remark about Lisa saying the night before, yeah, Lisa said he had signed a two-way contract. I can't find that in my transactions, and I'm gonna have to check with the King, Shannon Malone, but I'm not sure. But I like Keeta. So even PJ Carlissimo was like, I don't know if he signed a two-way contract or not, but PJ seemed to really like him as a ball player in those few minutes they were talking about him.
Yeah, it's Lisa. Is it Bington?
Yeah,
who does the Milwaukee Bucks and Chicago Sky. I quoted it. I have it written. She said he just signed a two-way deal for this year with the Kings. He played his first 2 seasons also on a two-way contract. Like you're putting that out there, and there's no confirmation. Actually, I haven't even got a comment back. I haven't got a reply to my inquiry. So as of right now, that's not the case. And they do have to press release that, just like how they press release that Keon Ellis and Jalen Slauson had signed two-way contracts like on middle of last week, whenever it was, right before the California Classic started.
Yeah, my guess, and I talked about this earlier, I just think maybe, she's going through her notes, looking at some stuff, getting familiar with the roster. I think she might have just read wrong, in last year's two-way contract. She equated it to, he's, on another two-way contract this year. I think just a little mishap. That's all. Because like you said, nobody has heard that. And I'm sure she knows a lot of people. She knows a lot more people than I do. She got it first. She got it. And then everybody else is sworn to secrecy. What?
It's also possible.
Not only does she have it first, she has it only.
Right.
Yes, she's the only one. Yeah, it's also possible that she saw that he'd got his qualifying offer and just put 2 and 2 together and thought that he was playing, like the qualifying offer meant that he had a contract. So again, I think that was probably more a slip of the tongue. But when you got your broadcast partner calling him Quota instead of Keeta, I think those things happen. You're like, I have no idea what's happening here. What is happening at Summer League? So,
maybe they'll give it to him tomorrow for his birthday.
There it is.
Another July birthday. It's crazy.
I don't think he wants a two-way contract for it. I'm just guessing. I don't think he wants a two-way contract.
James, did I ever talk about how much I admire Doug Christie? Let me tell you about the time.
You're not high enough for this to be your Isaiah Thomas impression. You need to be significantly higher.
He actually said, I love that man. And just so people know, I sent out 2 videos, one of the Neemias Keita situation and the other of Isaiah Thomas professing his love for Doug Christie. I sent that to Doug because Doug was sitting courtside while they kept showing him. And like, look, you have to understand that I know their relationship. So Doug had been drafted by the Seattle Supersonics. It didn't work out at all. He told them, do not draft me. There was a whole situation behind the scenes with George Karl and Wally Walker and Doug and his mother, where some things were said that should not have been said by the Seattle's brass. And so Doug said, I don't draft me. I will never play for you guys. They drafted him anyways. He ended up sitting out after they lowballed him and tried to give him a third of what the pick before him was getting. And then he ended up getting traded to the Lakers midseason. Lakers were just jam-packed with players like Eddie Jones at the 2. He ends up getting traded eventually to the New York Knicks. Pat Riley sits him down on day 1 and says, look, you're never going to play. I got too many shooting guards already, but thanks for coming in. And, you can sit here and learn from guys like Herb Jones, oh man, is it Herb Jones? It's not. No, it'll come to me. But anyway, then he ends up in Toronto, and
And don't gloss past the New York Knicks career, because I believe he was there for the double nickel. I believe Doug was there, sitting on the bench during Michael's 55. I think he told me that story once.
Herb Williams. There we go. Herb Williams. Yeah. Big center Herb Williams. Doug learned a lot, from how to be a pro and all that stuff while in New York. He gets shipped to Toronto, and Isaiah Thomas pulls him aside on day one and says, "Look, I know who you are. I've watched you throughout, the years, and I want to give you an opportunity." And he gave Doug his opportunity while Isaiah was running the Raptors, and he ran with it and really empowered Doug and helped Doug create the career that he ended up having after like 4 stops at 3 stops before that really didn't make any sense. And then of course he gets traded for Corliss Williamson to the Kings, and we know the rest of that story.
History.
Yeah.
Isaiah really loves Doug, even to the point where
I love Doug Christie.
Even to the point where Monty McNair sits down and he professes his love of Doug Christie to Monty McNair. One thing I feel like we missed out on yesterday. I would love to hear a conversation between PJ and Monty. Monty was with the crew the night before, and they had Chicago's guy who. That was
my gosh.
That was quite,
I fell asleep. That
was quite the experience. I don't know if he didn't realize he was on television or if he had dipped into Isaiah Thomas's stash, but he wasn't quite the bundle of excitement that Beth and PJ were. It was a little different.
Hey,
funny.
Where was Isaiah sitting? For the Monty McNair interview.
Oh, he was sitting on the outside of the window. That's right. They had to.
Hey, James.
Yeah, he was a little off the screen at that point. That entire situation. Though, here's the funny thing too. Like we, as reporters in Sacramento, we always get this. Jesus. we always get this. This thing that, we sit through a press conference with Monty McNair, and there's been, I think, 1 or 2 press conferences where it actually gives you some really good stuff. Most of the time, he dips, ducks, dodges, and he knows the 5 Ds of playing dodgeball, and you get very little. And then, I don't even know what his name is, the Bulls GM.
I don't remember.
But you have to remember that he comes from the Daryl Morey tree as well. He was in Houston with Monty, and so they all know each other really well. But my point was that we get to this point with Monty where it's like, okay, man, we got to get something out of you, and then you see what the Bulls reporters are dealing with sometimes, and thank goodness we got Monty. I think that's my point.
He's definitely not the Bulls general. That was the vice president of basketball ops. That's who.
Okay, but that's above a GM.
Yeah. No, for sure. They probably should have gone with the general manager. Just my opinion. Just my opinion.
Let's go there.
He almost seemed shocked to find out some of the guys who were on his team. PJ would bring up some guys on the roster, and we got him? Really? Wow. All he knew is Lonzo Ball was on the team and Lonzo wasn't playing. That's pretty much what he knew.
He was looking like us when we looked at the Bulls. Roster.
Man.
When we asked, what was Dalen Trent? What was his name? We was asking why he was representing Chicago.
Dalen Terry.
Dalen
Terry scored 4 points last night. He represented the Chicago Bulls at the lottery, and that man scored 4 points last night. Played 32 damn minutes. Scored 4 points last night.
Poor Dalen.
That's rough. I liked a lot of the Kings performances in Summer League. I liked a lot of what I saw. Jordan Ford just keeps impressing.
Really good.
Mike Daum really, really hit a bunch of big shots, and
So stay with Mike for a second, and we'll get back to Jordan. Keon as well. But Mike, we didn't really talk a lot about him today. He had a really solid outing.
Mm-hmm.
But that outing probably isn't for Sacramento, right? That outing is probably for somebody else.
Yeah, I would say it's probably for the G League, because he kind of provides a lot of what Sasha does. But we're talking about like a 27-year-old guy. That's like the guy who's in his 40s and goes back to college and tries to make the college team. I mean, we're talking about summer league here, where a bunch of 18, 19, 20-year-olds, and then some guys that are around his age, but not a lot. He's a mature player. I thought he really did fill a role, especially when when you don't have Keeta. Chance Comanche was a little all over the place, and Dom just kept hitting the 3-point shot. And so, I mean, he absolutely, I think, has deserved a look somewhere, and maybe he's played overseas for a long time, and he's bounced all over the world. And maybe he's at a point where he kind of wants to come home and finish up his career, like playing in the G League and stuff like that. You never know. He might end up back overseas. A lot of these guys, they do get really substantial offers. They'll get, a $400,000 or $500,000 deal to go back overseas, or maybe a little bit more than that, as opposed to making the 70, 80, 90 grand that you make for being a G League player. And so if you're not going to get a two-way contract, which, again, not a lot of teams are going out there and giving a two-way contract to a 27-year-old, almost 28-year-old guy. So yeah, I thought he was good. I thought he was a really good summer league player. And he also, to be honest with you, he helps the players that the Kings have that are going to be part of the system. The Colby Jones, Keon Ellis, Kessler Edwards, because he really does play a similar style to the players that they're going to play with at the next level. That shooting power forward, that type of player. They need to play with those guys in summer league. And once Keegan left, a lot of these guys are really struggling to find like who they are and what they are with this specific team, because they're being asked to do something that maybe they're not comfortable with, and maybe they will never have that role with another team.
I know you kind of explained some of the process before, but how does that work with, say, someone like Dom, if they want to, if he's willing to stay, and they say we don't have any two ways, but does he just go straight to the G League, the Stockton Kings team, or is he, obviously he's a free agent for anybody to pick up here in the summer league, but when's the deadline for that? Basically, is what I'm trying to figure out, of where he would be with the Stockton Kings, or if he wanted to sign with somebody else.
Yeah. So what you can do is you can extend what's called a summer contract to these guys, or Exhibit 10 contracts. Just depends. They're all kind of part and parcel of the same thing. Some of them have limitations. You can also assign guys to roster spots. So like during this summer, you can go all the way up to 20 roster spots. That includes your two ways. And I haven't had clarification on this yet, because they bumped the two-way contracts up to 3 this year, if that means you get another non-roster invitee, or if you don't, because it actually would matter for some of these guys. So typically, if you have two ways and 15 rostered players, and you get to training camp, that's 17 players. You can bring in 3 additional guys, right? And you sign those guys to either, again, you can sign them to standard contracts and give them like a guaranteed money to come and show up. So like Sam Merrill, or I think they did it last year with DJ Stewart, where they gave DJ like $150,000 for in guaranteed money. And then a day later they waived him, and then they invited him to camp on like an Exhibit 10 contract. So they already had his rights. So he went right to the Stockton Kings. But a guy like, if you guys remember Sam Merrill, who barely missed out making the team and really showed up and could really shoot the 3 ball, like really nice player. The Kings had given him like 150,000, again, to keep him from going overseas right away, and giving him a shot at training camp. When they waived him, though, he didn't go to the Stockton Kings. He went into the draft and he was the first pick in the draft, I believe, in the G League draft. But that was very specific. If you give a player over a certain dollar amount, you can't allocate them to your G League team. So you're not allowed to basically buy your G League players or buy guys out of the draft. Either if you give them all the money to keep them over here in the US and they are part of your program, they can go back to your program. If they're not part of your program or anyone else's and they go into the draft, if he was part of someone else's program, he would go straight to there. So again, that's how they lost Sam Merrill last year. And it's why Chima Moneki, they couldn't send Chima back down to Stockton after they waived him either, because they'd already given him too much guaranteed money. So it's a little complicated, and maybe a guy like Dom gets an invite to training camp, but like, I think that they might have some other guys that they would have their eyes set on that. And you might only have 2 roster spots to offer up it for training camp if they do fill out their entire 15-man roster and all 3 of their 2-way contracts.
Do you have to have 15? You don't have to have 15, right?
No, you can go down to 13, but you can't play below 13 for more than like 7 days or something. You have to bulk back up. And that sometimes, that's where you have to make tough decisions. And I also I'm not sure that the Kings will fill up both the roster spots. You have 14. I mean, you have 13 as of right now. If they do decide to bring Neemias Queta back on a full contract, he would be a 14th. Or you could give him a 2-way because they still have 1 2-way contract open. But there is a lot of value to having an open roster spot. And number one, you can do 2-for-1 trades where you trade 1 player for 2 and you don't have to waive somebody in order to do that trade. Number 2, there are those situations where a team they're over the cap, and they'll send somebody to you just to get underneath the luxury tax, and then you waive that player, but you get some sort of asset. And then there's also the 10-day. So we've seen the Kings use a 10-day quite a bit over the last couple of years. Last year was PJ Dozier. They signed a 10 days. They also, when did they sign a point guard at one point? That was a year before though, right? Justin Robinson. The Kings have always, if you have that 14th, 15th roster spot open, you can sit there and kind of give guys an opportunity and see if you like what they bring to the table. And if not, you just move on.
Yeah.
Did you say earlier that someone traveled with a walking boot in their suit? Like that really, I made note of that.
I'm just being sarcastic.
I don't think that you are. I don't think that you are. I just want you to know I caught that and I made note of it. Boot suitcase. Someone
Boot
was
suitcase
with a walking boot in there.
That may have been a running gag for a while, that somebody traveled with a walking boot.
All right.
Just saying.
We're gonna go through Getty Images and find out who wears.
I don't think you need to go through Getty Images. Yeah, and I'm just being I'm always a little sarcastic with some of that stuff, and I'm just being funny. No one truly traveled with a walking boot. The medical staff has the ability to get a walking boot instantly. But
there's a great picture of Pete Youngman and Doug Christie
that was
on Twitter today. That brightened up my timeline this morning to see those two together in Las Vegas.
Yeah, man, that's anytime you see those two together, it's always good.
Those are good people. Yeah. Good people.
Yeah.
And Jordan Ford's a good ball player. Mm-hmm. He has this weird thing, James, that we noticed. In case he called this yesterday, he really hot, then he's really cold, then he's really hot, then he's really cold, then he's really hot. He's going to suck tomorrow.
Oh no!
That's just the nature of the
nature of the beast.
It's the season. It's the summer league season that he's had. He's going to be terrible tomorrow. But man, when he's good, man, he's really good. I think there might be room for him.
I agree, man. I don't know how that again. You have to look at all of these players and their relationship to roster building and what it would mean for, if you bring in this player to this type of contract, what would that mean for this type of player? So for me, I've said this a couple of times to you guys. I'm going to keep saying it. I like Jordan Ford, and there are other players like Jordan Ford out there, but I'm kind of the opinion that the Kings don't need a true third point guard like they carried one all season long last year. especially with Malik Monk, who can slide over and play the point guard position with no problems. And now with the addition of Chris Duarte, I think it gives you that little bit more depth that you need in order to not carry a third point guard. But that doesn't mean you don't need one. And so I like the idea of a player on a two-way contract that's young, that maybe isn't all that young. Like, again, Jordan Ford's 25 years old. It's not like he's a kid, but he, like a player like that, where you can have him play in the G League a lot of the season, but you also have 50 games where he can come up and play with the parent club. And that, to me, it makes a lot of sense, because you always have to, especially with De'Aaron Fox, he's a healthy dude. He does actually, I think he played 73 games this last year. But those 9 games, like Matthew Dellavedova played more than I think anyone expected in those games. And so it would be nice to have a backup to the backup, but I don't know that you need a full time. And Dellavedova, is going to play in Australia this year. And so, if I were the Kings, I would at least consider something like that with Jordan Ford. But if you sign Jordan Ford to a two-way, what does that mean for Neemias Queta? What does that mean for your other roster spots? And that's where I kind of like what I mean by, like, every single one of these moves has like a ripple effect for other players, and you have to fit everybody in some way, or you just leave some guys behind, and that's also possible.
And see, I still think you can, I don't really like using this word, but you can get away with having Jordan Ford on a two-way. As well as he's played and as good as he's looked to us, I don't think he'll get snatched up by another team that's going to give him, they'd have to give him like a guaranteed roster spot, right, for him to go away from the Kings from a two-way, correct?
Well, yeah, no. Once you're on a two-way, you're on a two-way. Like, your rights are owned by that team. But if he's not on a two-way, yeah.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like, if he's right now, nothing's on the table. But if a two-way from the Kings is there and a two-way from Denver, I think he would choose the Kings. But if they are giving him a roster spot, obviously he's gone. I don't think he's going to be in that situation, though.
Yeah, I think, again, we always have, I like to call it the Ike Diagu effect here in Sacramento, where people fall in love with people and then think that they're going to make a bunch of money. And, it happened to Ike Diagu. He ends up scoring 30 points in back-to-back games to end it in the 2008-9 or 09-010 season. And then everyone's like, oh, let's give him a 3-year, $27 million deal. I don't think Ike Diagu ever got a guaranteed contract ever again in the NBA. Like, things happen at the back end of the season. Things happen in summer league that make players look really good. And again, what I'll say with Jordan is I think he's done a very, very good job. But what would he look like if Keegan Murray was still on this team? How different would he look? And the answer is he probably wouldn't be putting up 25 points and 8 assists in a game. So if I were the Kings, and like Jordan played for the Stockton Kings last year, so if he's going to play in the G League and he's not going to play for a two-way and he doesn't earn a two-way, his rights will go to Sacramento. But this is where we're talking about that other clause where you can sign a guy to a regular contract, especially if you have your 14th and 15th roster spots open. You can sign a guy to a contract on September 15th, and then you can waive him on September 16th before the start of training camp. But you can guarantee money in that contract. And so he could get $150,000. And so he can stick around in the US and be able to live on a smaller salary at the G League level because he already got a bonus. And so those are things that I think that, might make sense if the two-way doesn't make sense for the Kings. And look, has he outplayed Slauson? Without any question. Now, they played totally different positions, and you just spent a second-round pick on Slauson. You already gave him a two-way contract. But to me, Slauson's almost 24 years old. They're only like a year difference. And who's going to play? If it really push comes to shove, is one of them going to play over the other one in the future? Probably Jordan Ford has a smoother path to getting into, onto the main roster than Slauson would. But now you've got Slauson on a two-way and you don't have Jordan on a two-way. So, I think he's responded well enough in summer league to at least earn this conversation.
We're going to come back. I want to ask you about a player that many Kings fans would be excited to see back in a Kings uniform. We'll talk about that. With D'Lo and Casey return here with James Ham, brought to you by Sky River Casino and Sacramento Sports Leader, ESPN 1320.
My bad. I realized how late I asked that.
It's fine. It's all good.
Yeah, it's my bad. I went long too because I didn't know where you guys were going to break. We blew through the 23. So I'm like, oh, well, I don't know.
I'm the host, James. That's my responsibility.
All right. It's all good.
All right.
It's all good. It's not like we got competition or anything. Yes, indeed.
Aldrin J. Hey, Ham, do the Kings still have their MLE? They do not have their MLE. They were a cap room team. They used all their cap space. They have no cap space. They have the room exception, which is $7.7 million, and that is going to Sasha Vezenkov, who did not sign his contract in Sacramento or in Las Vegas, but I believe it's only because he has to do his whole situation in the buyout stuff and get it all taken care of. Yeah, Aldrin, it's kind of a bummer because there are two players out there that I think would make sense for the Kings, and Christian Wood and Kelly Oubre. But I don't know how either one of them.
Christian Wood can't be MLE at this point, right?
Christian Wood might not be. He might have to take a minimum deal.
He might be league minimum. That's what I was thinking.
I mean, for a guy, what did he average last year? 18 and 10? And didn't Oubre average 20 points a game last season? Yes.
In Charlotte?
Yeah, in Charlotte. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm the Kings, I would at least kick the tires because you have two contract spaces, and it's a bummer because you can't really give these guys a whole lot of money. And I think the biggest thing that the biggest issue the Kings have is that they don't have they don't even have rotation spots. Yeah.
Uncle Looney brought some up. I assume he was talking about Sasha because he made this remark and it fits. Sasha got to step up his conditioning, or is he gonna look like Kevin Huerter did in month number 2 last year?
Yeah, I don't know.
I know he just played a ton of basketball, but like Kings were moving last year.
He's a big lumbering dude. Like I mean, I think that's some of the that's why when people ask, do you think that he'll be a starter? And I always say, no, I don't think so. Like, it's possible, but I mean, there are players like him in the league that have no problems keeping up. We talk about him like the Davis Bertans, the who's the other dude?
Hell, Nikola Jokic gets up and down the floor. He looks like he's going to die on every possession, but he gets up and down the floor just fine. Yeah, he looks exhausted.
Yeah.
But he's fine. He's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Controlling everything.
He does control everything.
He needs to train with a trick that I learned when I used to do like mixed martial arts stuff is you train with a mouthpiece. Like even when you're not sparring, you train with a mouthpiece in and you can bite down on it and teaches to keep your mouth closed. And that changes the way you breathe during high intensity workouts. Jokic and Sasha need to train with mouthpieces. Just bite down on them and that's breathing.
Better yet,
yes.
You can train them.
Scott brings up Joe Ingles is a lumber. He is, and like Maxi Kleber, that's another guy that like Sasha reminds me of some of these guys. Like I don't want to just like say he reminds me of white European players, but
well, he doesn't remind you of Dr. J. So
no, he reminds me of some like, I guess maybe like not like slow-mo because like he does not, his game is not all that similar to that.
It is really jarring how slow that shot is.
Remember when Jalen tried to force that at the draft? He's like, I'm not going to just compare a white guy to a white guy.
Yeah.
This guy here, Frank Kaminsky, he really reminds me of Kevin Duckworth.
Oh, no. And Duck is one of the long list. A long list of the
Blazers.
late 80s, early 2000 Blazers who have passed away.
Jerome Kersey was another one.
Cliff Robinson.
Yeah, jeez.
Yeah, Uncle Cliffy. I mean, he did Survivor and then died of cancer. They're all right around like 52, 53. Well, I think Duckworth was in his 40s.
Someone passed away. Oh, Mantar. Remember the wrestler from like 95?
I remember the name.
He had a terrible like helmet with like, it was not a helmet. It was a hood that he'd wear to the ring that had like antlers.
I do remember that now.
Yeah, he passed away. He's like 55 years old.
Man.
Like, man, that means he was in his 20s, and they were like, hey, let's call this guy Mantar. And it's so funny they refer to these guys as WWE wrestlers. Man, he was a WWE wrestler for like a minute and a half because they realized, yeah, this isn't going to work. We made this dude a Mantar. Oh, we're coming back. All right, we're back here with our 1320 Kings insider and creator of the Kings Beat, James Ham. Are we running it back at 4? We don't. There's literally nothing today.
It's literally that time of year. There's no.
I don't know. These last couple of days have been fun.
No, it's been a great time.
I'm with it. James, one thing that Las Vegas brings are general managers and scouts together for individual workouts. And I know a lot of Kings fans were excited to see one of their favorites holding a personal workout in which your buddy and partner over there on the Kings Beat podcast, Sean Cunningham, was in attendance for. And everyone figured this out quite quickly, talking about Harry Giles. We'll break a journalistic rule here, one that most people don't follow, with a 2-part question.
Does
Harry Giles have a place with the Sacramento Kings? Does Harry Giles have a place in the National Basketball Association?
I think I would like to say yes to both, but I'm certainly going to say no and yes. Yeah, I think that there is a place for Harry Giles in the NBA. And I also think that his buddy Jason Tatum really did him a huge service by going in and fighting in the new CBA to have the Harry Giles exemption, basically. So the rule is for 2-way contracts that if you're in your first 3 years of the NBA, you can go sign on a 2-way contract. But once you hit year 3, you're out. You can't sign a 2-way. So if guys keep fighting their way in the G League and they can't really make it, it's prohibitive for them to come back and play. In the new CBA, there's an exemption for someone like Harry Giles who missed an entire year of his first 3 years due to injury. And so now Harry is eligible again to get a 2-way contract. And I think that that's probably going to be his path to the NBA. I hope that it's his path to the NBA, but you just don't know. Like, he's a kid with unbelievable talent. Not only unbelievable talent, but unbelievable charisma. He's a good dude. Everyone loves him. He's a fan favorite, but he also has had, bilateral ACL tears in both knees as like a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old. He's had at least 1 or 2 cleanups since then. And, he's a player that he did a workout on Monday. I think teams that are serious checked back in with him 2 days later and said, what do the knees look like? And that's always been the problem. Like, can he hold up? And I hope that there's a spot for him. And when it comes to Sacramento, I'm not going to say no, there's no way, because the Kings do have 2 roster spots. They do have a 2-way contract. And they could do something like a non-guaranteed deal. It was huge that it shows you his relationships with guys like De'Aaron Fox, that during Game 7 of the first round of the playoffs with the Golden State Warriors, Harry was sitting courtside with Rasay, cheering his guys on, and was like part of the atmosphere. He was out there on the court waving a towel and trying to get everybody riled up. Like, he is just a tremendous young man, but he's also 19 years old when he came into the league and didn't know, things happen when you're young and when you have injuries and you're not part of everything and you're not allowed to be on the court with everybody. You're sort of a dude lost in space a little bit. And then the Kings made decisions when he was here to like fire their training staff or go away from their training staff that had supported him his whole first year, and Pete Youngman. And so, yeah, I hope he finds his way back to the league. He's got a ton of talent, one of the highest basketball IQ players that you're going to find. His passing ability, everything to him is so natural, a lot like it was with Chris Webber. That's what you always see. You see this natural ability that he has, but I just don't know what that means. Like who the Kings weren't one of the, I think 8 teams that were there to watch him. And that doesn't mean anything. Realistically, the Kings never once spoke to Davion Mitchell before they drafted him. Not even, they didn't have him to Sacramento or anywhere else. So, but it's a risk. It's a risk of a roster spot. It's a risk of money. And you already went down this road with him once. And while it's a different coaching staff, a new training staff, a new front office, everything is new. There are other people who are holdovers here who may have an opinion on that as well.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time with I don't want to say perceived risk, because there is risk involved, but I don't know why you wouldn't. Like, to me, I look at it like this, and I don't want to be, I'm not trying to be mean-spirited to this guy or anything, or pick on him or anything like that. Like, it's not how I feel. But right now today, I feel like if you're possibly looking at Keeta for that spot, I would believe you would get more out of Harry Giles than Keeta. I know he's got the injuries, the knee injuries, all this other stuff. I've seen more from Harry Giles in the NBA than I have from Neemias Keeta. Mm-hmm. So why not? I would take a chance on Harry Giles. I know that's probably too simplistic of it. I know they have 2 years. This group has 2 years invested in Keeta, and to just kind of throw that away for a guy like Harry Giles probably isn't something they'd want to do. But I don't know. I don't. That's kind of the way I'm looking at it. James, is that too simplistic?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is, because the problem that you have is that while Harry's only 25 years old, he hasn't played an NBA game since the 2020-21 season. So, that's a long time to go without playing. And, he tried to go the G League route. That didn't really work out for him. And he's also not someone who is like fully cemented himself in the NBA. Like he hadn't cemented himself in his first 2 years. And like, I was there for the whole mess, and I felt bad watching it all unfold the way that it did. And I wish that it didn't unfold the way that it did with Vlade not picking up his 4th year option. To me, I thought it was ludicrous to not pick up the 4th year option and just give yourself an opportunity to see if Harry could grow. But like, look, he spent 2 years away, trying to get back in. And so at this point, maybe there is some growing up that happened. Maybe there are, because this wasn't a situation where one person was at fault. It was where like both sides were at fault, but a 21, 22-year-old kid slipped through the cracks, and that shouldn't have happened. And that's not the organization the Kings are now. It was the organization they were then, and they allowed something to slip through the crack that never should have happened. So I'm hoping that he gets an opportunity. And if nothing else, I hope that he's part of the league in some way. Because again, it's always going to come down to, number one, like how quickly can he develop and get on the floor and actually help you. But number two, can his knees hold up? That's always going to be the question. This is a question he had when he was, the number one player in high school basketball and the superstar of Team USA when he was 15, 16 years old. It all came down to the knee issues. Even at Duke, he barely played at Duke and then sat out an entire year to begin his NBA career. So yeah, it's tough. I hope the best for him.
Here? Did he get hurt here?
He got hurt here. They just held him out for the year.
Yeah, I know they held him out for a year, but he played.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recall
getting hurt. I know it's. He didn't he's back. He lit the world on fire. He's the best player in the world again. But I don't recall there being a setback.
No, and I don't want to overstate it, but that time and period we talked about last year before the pandemic when Harry Giles, due to injury, was kind of forced to play, I thought he played really well. It was like a big reason why the Kings were starting to play good basketball. And that was really the last we saw of him on a consistent basis. But yeah, I thought he played really well in that time. So
he also during training camp and preseason for Portland was really, really good, but they were playing without all of their bigs. All of their bigs were hurt, and he played really, really well. And I went on a show up there, and they asked me about him, and I was really honest about it. I said, like, look, like if you're expecting Harry Giles to be your savior, then there's a problem here, because we're talking about a kid who does not have the games of experience, and he's had knee issues. He's looked great in preseason, but like let's give him an opportunity to grow into what he can become. Don't just start saying, oh my gosh, he's going to play 30 minutes a night, and like start building your team around him, which a lot of people up there started to do. Like the hype machine got way too big for him. And he took exception to what I said, which again, he took it the wrong way, because I wasn't meaning anything other than like, give him an opportunity. Like, don't start putting expectations on a kid that, again, has been heaped on him again and again and again, all these expectations that no one can live up to. And he unfortunately has not been able to live up to them. And in Portland, it didn't last very long. Like they went a different direction after year one. I think he played like 38 games for Portland that year. And it was, like when they needed injury replacements, they brought him in. When they didn't, he sat there, and it's unfortunate, but this is the NBA. Every year, 60 new players are drafted, many of which are on guaranteed contracts that take 30 jobs away from someone else. And so someone loses every year. And unfortunately, Harry Giles has been part of that churn machine.
Can you help me out, James? Because I didn't have you as a pillar in my life at this time like I do now. Was Vlade frustrated with Harry Giles? For some reason, I remember a story that Vlade was frustrated with Harry, whether it was conditioning or something coming into a season that he didn't feel like he was prepared for. Yeah. Is there any validity to that? Was that the story behind it?
Yeah. So the story, again, there's going to be two sides to everything, right? So the story is that
Vlade's on the wrong side of these two sides a lot.
He is, but
nice guy. Also, but still.
No, but I also will tell you that like Vlade is a caring dude. Like Vlade wears his heart on his sleeve, and Vlade loved Harry Giles. Like you can't be around Harry without smiling. Like that's just the way he is. He's just an absolute crack up, and he's a very, very good kid. But they had at the end of the season, they'd given him like what they wanted to see from him. And again, they just had a medical changeover. And so in the meantime, Harry went his way and the Kings went their way, getting ready for the California Classic. So, you have that April 15th until July 1st window. And when Harry came back for the California Classic a couple of days before, they did their medical tests on him, and it wasn't good. Like they could tell that he hadn't been able to keep up with all of his rehab, and there was concern about his knee right away. And so they shut him down for the California Classic, and they weren't happy about that at all. And there is also a story of they had sent a trainer to go work out with him and was supposed to be in Atlanta, and the guy flew to Atlanta and Harry wasn't in Atlanta. He was in LA, and they had to send a trainer somewhere else. And so there was some frustration. Then they get to training camp, and unfortunately it was like a lot of the same stuff. Now, look, a lot of this point of view is coming from the Kings' point of view. And so I'm going to leave a door open for not all of it to be 100%. And that's why I always tell you guys that this was a situation that was multiple. It was not just a player. He is a very young man, and you loaded a team up with too many young guys. So Harry was the member of a 4-man like draft class, and De'Aaron Fox, Harry Giles, Justin Jackson, and Frank Mason. But also you brought Bogdan Bogdanovic over that year as a rookie. And the year before, you had drafted Papagiannis. you had drafted Malachi Richardson, you had drafted Scalabiciere, and you traded for Buddy Hield.
It's hard to see why the playoff drought just ended last year.
Yeah. So in year one for Harry, there was 9 first and second. Well, first year, 1 year of experience and rookies on the team.
Yeah.
That's just not a place where you can really live and grow and everything else. So like, look, I don't, all of these things, Harry Giles, his knee swelled up when he got back to training camp and the Kings shut him down. And then they didn't pick up his option right then. And again, I thought that was a joke at the time. And I did not agree with it at all because the Kings had also, the year before, picked up Caleb Swanigan's first round pick. I mean, his fourth year option or third year option. And so they had Caleb Swanigan at like $2.9 million, and they weren't willing to give Harry Giles like 2.5 or $3 million that he was got to make. And none of it made a whole lot of sense. So
feels like a movie. That feels like something I would do just out of frustration. Well, forget it. Don't pick up the option. Thankfully, I got Kenny and James. No. We're going to pick up the option. It's $2 million. We need to give this a shot. Meanwhile,
I'm pulling for him.
No, just let him go. Crap.
I'm pulling for him. I want him to be in the league because he's a great spirit and, he's a really good kid. And I feel for him because, he's a really good kid that like came up through, like organized basketball, blew out his knee as a 15-year-old. Like, he didn't get the same rehab that they get at the NBA level, as a 17-year-old blows out his knee again. He just like, those things are so monumental for a 6'10" kid. And like, how do you, like, the medical care maybe wasn't as great as it should have been. It wasn't the best of the best of the best of the best, which is what you get at the NBA level. And so, he's had issues.
Yeah, it's tough.
I want him back here in Sacramento.
Well,
I'm just gonna say it.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think it'll happen.
And I think sometimes we get, this the nostalgia vibes with certain guys, and how much just seeing Harry at the playoff game and the way people reacted to him and all of that. But when you push all of that stuff aside and you think about a player that could potentially fit with Sacramento, when Harry's on, it's like, yeah, that could be the guy. Like that again,
feels like his game.
We're talking an uber minimal role here. It feels like it would work. I'm a far bigger fan of Quota than you are, but
I like Keeta.
I'm a far bigger fan of Neemias Queta than you are. But like I thought your comp was fair though. In terms of what we've seen. That's why, James, I don't want Neemias Queta to get that two-way contract. I want him to be, the 14th or 15th man on the roster, like the actual roster spot, because I want him. I understand the argument of playing in Stockton and actually getting minutes. I feel like he needs to play in NBA games. Now, I know those opportunities aren't going to present themselves every night, but that's his role here right now. And to be able to be with Alex Lynn and Domas and all that, I feel like that's what he needs as a basketball player. I do not feel like another year with a two-way contract does him any good.
I agree. And I think that him training and going through, training camp, but also practicing every day against Alex Len, against Domantas Sabonis, against Trey Lyles, like all three of those guys bring something totally different to the table. They're very different style, powerful. I mean, as centers. And I think to have him play with those guys would actually really, really benefit him. But I also know that last year, like that was the best thing for him, is to stay the whole season in Stockton and to grow and be part of that. So I really do think that, like, I would like to see Neemias on the main roster as well. And if you're going to invest in somebody and he's going to show up and finish second in the G League MVP balloting and make all defensive team and all first team G League and, be the player that he became, like, that's sort of the payout, right? You're supposed to reward like someone who takes the steps that you need them to take. And that's where I'm at with him. Like he has done everything in his power to like get better. And I've seen him even improve in his 5 summer league games or 4 summer league games, whatever it was. So I'm hoping that he gets a shot here, but I don't know. We'll see.
I like Keeta. Let's go, Keeta.
Don't try that now.
What?
You've been trying to waive Keeta for a week and a half.
I've not been trying to wait.
Well, that's true. You haven't been trying to waive. You haven't been trying to waive him. You're just begging for something from him. And that's the thing. He's not going to play anymore. He's not going to play tomorrow night. The next time we see Neemias Queta, it will be when training camp gets underway in late